Good morning, everyone. My name is Heyo Kim, Chief Operating Officer for King County, and I am Executive Zahalai's delegate to chair today's KCRHA Governing Board meeting. And I call this June meeting of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority's Governing Board to order. Thank you, Seattle Public Library, for hosting the in-person location today, and thanks to everyone else who is on virtually. So we begin every meeting by grounding ourselves in our theory of change, which reads, if we create a homelessness response system that centers people with lived experience of homelessness, then we will be able to respond to needs and eliminate inequities in order to end homelessness for all. Next, we have our land acknowledgement. And we acknowledge that King County is located on the unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples. We honor this land and its people, past and present, and we are committed to directing funding and resources to organizations led by and in support of Native and Indigenous people. Again, thank you all for being here. And Afyon, will you please take roll call?
Yes, Chair. Chair Kim?
Present.
Member Wilson?
Present.
Member Aviva?
Present.
Member Backus? Member Robertson?
Present.
Member Barone?
Present.
Member Bracken? Member Fain?
Here.
Member Foster?
Here.
Member Hay?
I'm here.
Member Jing?
Present.
Member Prince? Member Rink?
Present.
Chair, we have quorum with 10 members.
Thank you very much. Next is our consent agenda. We have one item on the consent agenda, and it is the approval of our May 2026 Governing Board meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the May 2026 minutes?
So moved, Chair.
I think that was
I second.
Councilmember Barone
I second.
and Kent. Thank you. Seconded. The motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. The consent agenda has passed. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kinnison for our monthly CEO report. Dr. Kinnison?
Thank you, Chair Kim. Hello, Governing Board members and others who are watching. We have a packed agenda. We'll be providing briefings on our Corrective Action Plan and on our point-in-time count. So for this section, I'll focus on our continuum of care work. We are really proud of our work with the DSA Pioneer Square initiative that's supported by Purpose, Dignity, Action, and ETS Reach. Since the beginning of that effort in Pioneer Square, we've been able to move 37 households. We've referred them to permanent supportive housing to create vacancies in the participating shelters. 3 of those households are already moved into their new homes. So feeling really good about that partnership and the concentrated effort and resources in that neighborhood. Our coordinated entry team is also going to begin using what we're calling a dynamic youth by name list that's been developed and maintained by KCRHA's research and data team in our weekly case conferencing meetings so that we can discuss housing resources and really meet the needs that are quite different than the adult population of our youth and young adults experiencing homelessness. That's also been a tremendous collaborative effort concentrated over the last year and a half, but certainly longer than that, between the youth providers, some of our private funders, and other agencies that serve youth and young adults. Moving on to the notice of funding announcement, as you all know, the 2026 HUD notice of funding announcement was released. Our local request for applications is open and closes next week so that we can begin our rating and ranking process as approved by the COC board. On June 10th, HUD released a second notice of funding announcement related to federal COC funds. This is focused on youth homelessness. It has a shorter application window than the larger NOFO. We've been engaging with youth-focused agencies and other system partners to explore potential collaborations and proposals that we could submit in response to this funding announcement. All of the details of these opportunities are available on the KCRHA website, and we have an info line for folks who are interested in applying and need more information. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Chair Kim, so we can get on with some of our other reports.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Dr. Kinnison on her report? Okay, so seeing none, we next have public comment. And if you are here with us in person, please sign up to comment with Afyong. Lisa and Afyong, I don't think I see anyone else in the room with you. But if you are providing comment via Zoom, please raise your hand now and you will be called in the order received.
Okay. We have no one in person and we have one person online. Joe Kunzner, are you with us?
Yes, ma'am, I am, and you pronounced my name okay. Thanks for the timer. Joe Kunzler here. I understand everyone here this morning is coming from a good place and wants to do right by everybody and the environment and house the homeless, which I consider a truly moral cause. However, I want to submit to you that we need to realize that a big chunk of the homeless problem is addiction. And we need to start having posters of some of you elected officials and public servants up saying, you can't do this on drugs. You can't be the mayor of Seattle on drugs. You can't be on the King County Council on drugs. You can't fly for the Blue Angels on drugs. You know, that was pretty impactful posters when I was going through school in the 90s. And I think we need to bring that back. I also think the fact this mayor of Seattle wasn't able to create 500 homes.
Mr. Kunzler, I'm sorry, but we need you to adhere to the items on the agenda. So if you want to speak to any of the items on today's agenda, we absolutely welcome your comments.
I thought we could generally discuss homelessness. Let me be gracious and call up your agenda to make sure I'm in compliance. You can keep the clock running because I do apologize, but this mayor needed to get 500 homes built. It wasn't done. I don't care.
Mr. Kunzler, please speak to the items on today's agenda, please.
I think I am, and I really don't appreciate not being able to call the mayor who failed to do her job. But I will check the agenda, and there is a thing here on the time and point time count. And with 35 seconds left, I really hope in that point time count you looked at the addiction issue, because I don't care if you have the person behind Hacks and Wonks doing your PR. You need to be dealing with this addiction problem that's fueling the homelessness. And I hope I'm clear and succinct. And I apologize for the confusion in the issues. I do thank you for your public service. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Chair, we have no other hands raised virtually, and so you can close public comment.
Great. With that, public comment is closed. Thank you all very much. Next, we have the Finance Committee, which will be introducing a resolution 2605 for the board's consideration. Member Barone.
Thank you so much, Chair Kim. I appreciate colleagues the opportunity to address this issue. As all of you recall, at our recent meeting, an earlier meeting of the board, we approved a resolution creating a finance committee, and we had some amendments, kind of late amendments to that resolution, that were primarily focused on addressing the results of the forensic evaluation. The Finance Committee has begun to meet, and I want to acknowledge and appreciate the work of Board Member Foster and CEO Kim on chairing that committee. As the Finance Committee has been meeting, and we've seen kind of the role of the committee, I think we found that there was need to adjust some of the language that we had to kind of clarify the role of the Finance Committee, which was intended as an advisory body to this governing board. And so the changes, the relatively small amendments that we're proposing here, and these have been worked in collaboration with the executive's office and the mayor's office. It's more to clarify the role of the finance committee going forward and make sure that we are focused on that committee as an advisory body, which was the intent all along of this process. So that you'll see in the resolution the changes that are being proposed through this new resolution that would amend the earlier resolution. And I also want to acknowledge that I think in further conversations since the packet went out, that there's going to be a small amendment that is going to be proposed that I'll let the executives team share, but one that I'm supportive of. So I'll pause there.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Barone. And I will apologize for not getting this, tracking this when Councilmember Barone very kindly offered up his resolution. I just want to, this will be a verbal change, a friendly amendment to, if you take a look at Councilmember Barone's proposed resolution, under Section F, we would like to actually um, uh, uh, amend the language in section F to simply read, advise the governing board in the development of a documented process for the hiring of positions critical for core service delivery, period. We would like to propose deleting the next sentence. The CEO shall pause on the recruitment and hiring of vacant or new positions unless approved by the governing board or finance committee. One of the things that I think everyone recognizes is that our role as board members is to hire the CEO. We don't want to create unwittingly bottlenecks to the day-to-day operations, including the hiring. We absolutely have a role to play in monitoring and helping to advise the CEO, but I think we unwittingly created sort of a bottleneck in having the board play sort of a second management tier role. And so the friendly amendment is to simply have Section F changed to read as quote, advise the governing board in the development of a documented process for the hiring of positions critical for core service delivery, period. And that will be the new Section F. I believe Councilmember Barone, one of your staff members also pointed out that Section 5 should actually read Section 4, and that would be the other verbal change that I would propose as a friendly amendment to Councilmember Barone's resolution.
Thank you, Sue Kim. I know we want to have discussion, but I'll just to get the ball moving. I'll go ahead and move approval of resolution 2026-05 for approval by the governing board.
Second.
Great. Is there any discussion or questions? Okay, I'm sorry, Mayor Wilson.
Thank you. And just to clarify, this is moving the resolution as amended, so we're not actually voting on the amendment. That's been, everyone's okay with that. That's just part of the resolution now. Is that right?
Unless there's
Yeah.
any objections, I think we can do it that way, but I'll let the chair decide that.
Yeah, this is to move the amendment to the resolution right now, and then we'll go to the actually voting on the resolution, I think.
So, okay. so I understood Board Member Barone to be moving the entire resolution.
Oh, I'm sorry, as amended, as
As
amended.
amended. Okay, good. Just
Sorry,
wanted to
sorry,
make sure
sorry.
I'm clear what we're doing.
I'm
Okay,
not a
yeah,
parliamentarian.
Okay, yeah, thank you all. So yeah, thank you, Board Member Barone, for your continued leadership on this, and thank you to the executive and to Board Member Foster for your leadership as well. I'm strongly in support of the resolution as amended. Thanks for catching the needed change, and I think this is in line with the spirit of the original intention of creating this committee, and appropriately kind of adjusts its mandate. So I appreciate all the work on this.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, all those approve, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none, the resolution is adopted. Thank you all. Okay, next, next the board will consider a resolution to approve the Olive Towers lease extension. Jeff Sims, Chief Programs Officer, is here to brief the board.
Thank you, Chair. I will share my screen in just a moment. Chair, could you confirm for me that it advanced to the second slide for you all? It should say encampment resolution program now.
It says Encampment Resolution Program, correct?
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. The action before the board is to authorize KCRHA to enter into an extension of a master lease that we hold as part of the Encampment Resolution Program. A little bit of background, because we have many new members on the board now relative to when that initiative was started. It goes back a few years. It was initially set up by Governor Inslee through the Washington Department of Commerce, and it responded to unsanctioned encampments that were on state-owned property. The initiative initially had a substantial amount of one-time funding that some of which we used to purchase a location for permanent supportive housing, and the rest of that we used for temporary field support teams, either doing outreach or hotel rooms that were leased to be shelter beds on a short-term basis, where we put the rest of the funding into permanent supportive housing and used all of that ongoing funding to be able to create that housing pathway. And that was actually one of the underlying reasons that the project was so successful. At the time that we stopped doing additional resolutions, we had a 91% acceptance rate of people in the encampments moving indoors into housing. From what I understand from HUD, that is actually the best rate in the entire country, demonstrating that our community really does know how to approach doing this work when we are properly resourced and have those opportunities. And the component of that overall initiative was to master lease. As I mentioned, we had some one-time funding that allowed us to purchase one building and pay for services, but a substantial portion of it was master leasing apartments so that we could lower the barriers, and households that were in those encampments that otherwise wouldn't have a pathway to housing would be able to move into them. So KCRHA is the actual leaseholder there. We've already had one of those leases get through its first 3-year term and come up for renewal, and we're now on our second. That's what we call Olive Towers. It's not actually a tower. It's actually 4 independent structures that are about 5 or 6 stories tall. You can see some details here. It's about 60 units. It's got a gated courtyard. There's fencing around it. It's located near major bus routes, and this again has just finished its first 3-year term. And we'd be looking to extend this for an additional 5 years. And I'll note a couple things with the lease term that are a little bit different. Whereas initially we had entered into an overall lease with a 3-year initial term, and then we would then do a 5-year extension, assuming that everything had been working well with the property. We are actually proposing to make some changes to our 5-year extension that are all advantageous for us as a community. We are able to, because rents have not increased, change the term around how rents will change. At the time we entered into this lease, rents were rising at 8-9% as measured by HUD every year. And so we were able to negotiate a rate that it would exceed by 4%, so below the rates that rents were changing at the time. And that really saved us money as a community and on this initiative. This year, which would apply to our next year's rent prices have not increased. We're fortunate to be working here with a really mission-driven property owner who is willing to work with us and has agreed to changing the rate that our lease will increase to align with whatever the change in fair market rent is. So in this coming year, it would not have increased because fair market rent did not increase. And then rather having it being a guaranteed increase of 4%, we're changing it to being a cap of 4%. So this is really advantageous for us, and we're fortunate to be working with the owners of this property, SJC Olive, to make that possible. There's one other item that we were able to negotiate in this lease renewal that, again, was preferential for us. I think we're all familiar with renting at some point in time where the landlord will offer you 1 month free on your 12-month lease, and they'll even prorate that out. Something similar, because this is an ownership group that operates a lot of different apartments, they were willing to consider something like that. They actually offered that. And then we were able to negotiate that into just being a reduction in our overall rent, and then calculating subsequent years off of that. So you can see that the amount that we're paying, $111,375, is actually a reduction from what we would have paid in this first year anyway. So we're not only getting better long-term rates in terms of what the increases could be, we're also reducing what we'll be paying in the short term with this renewal. So we're really appreciative of the negotiations we've been able to have. And this is, of course, below FMR and all of those kinds of considerations. So that's the action that we have before you as board members today. This is the exact step that you'd be taking. Our interlocal agreement that creates KCRHA requires that if we enter into an agreement for real property or real estate that is 1 year or longer, we have your authorization to do so. So we're seeking your approval to enter into that 5-year renewal of this lease so we can continue to permanently house people at this location. We do have other service providers and contracts that go into providing the services there. This is just about being able to retain those units. And with that, I'll stop and turn it over for questions.
Mayor Wilson?
Yeah, so this is a state-funded program. Do we have a funding commitment from the state that would support the program for the duration of this proposed lease term?
Yeah, at this time in the biennial budget, it continues to be in the state operating budget. For us, it's $16 million per year. Commerce has not been, and the state has not been providing inflationary increases for that amount, which this year and in this current biennium, we don't anticipate to be an issue. Also, there are some things we can do, like moving scattered site units as people's leases end. If we have vacancies that arise, we can move them into the master leased units instead, so that we're able to reduce our overall costs. That's a very slow rate of change that wouldn't occur. But Commerce has actually been willing to engage in multi-year contracts with us because of their commitment to this funding. So we've routinely been getting contracts that apply throughout the entire biennium, or sometimes even beyond that, because they are committed to the long-term funding of this. The question is really, somewhere down the line, we'll have a need for inflationary increases. Rents will eventually go up, and that will be something that we've been collaborating with the other 4 counties that receive these funds to make sure is front and present for Commerce and their awareness.
So just to clarify, so we have a commitment for this biennium, but not necessarily for the full lease term.
Our actual technical agreement only runs through the biennium, but they have committed to providing this funding to us long term. It's just our contract actually only covers the biennium. That's all they're actually legally allowed to do at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Barone?
Thank you, Chair. Jeff, can you just confirm, obviously, both the city and the county are having conversations about the future of KCRHA. So I just want to make sure that the lease language has language that would allow, if there were decisions made that would transition KCRH's responsibilities to the entity, that there is language in the lease that would facilitate that transition, or that there's language about a successor to continue the lease.
Yeah, Member Rowan, you hit it exactly. We just are adding through that amendment the statement that it's KCRHA or its successor agency, so there'd be a pathway for that to be designated.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to clarify, because you mentioned as a possibility for cost savings as units in the master lease open up, moving households from scattered sites into that property. In the program, how many households are currently in scattered sites that are funded through this program?
It's currently about 40 households.
Okay, so that's in addition to the 60 residents at the Olive Towers site. There's also 40 households in scattered sites. That's correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And largely, we actually have 4 properties that we master lease. This is one of those 4.
Yeah.
There's a location that was purchased with those one-time funds, and that's technically held by the Low Income Housing Institute, but they have the operating contract with us to be able to maintain that. And then we have the 40 scattered site units as well.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for Jeff? Just
Sorry, this
scroll.
is me again.
Oh, sorry, Mayor. Yes.
Sorry, I just keep thinking of things. So do you have a sense from how the program has operated so far, what the rate of potential attrition from these units would be, like over the course of a year or 2 years? How many units might we expect to become vacant? And, I understand that the program's not accepting new households, but, if units are becoming vacant and the funding is available, is there a reason why we would choose to not move new households into those units versus just shrinking the program?
Oh, the only place we'd really be looking, I think, in the short term to shrink would actually just be those scattered site units. And honestly, that is frequently has been a circumstance where the master lease locations that we have 24/7 staffing, and the scattered site privately leased units do not. And so often there's a better service match for the households that moving them into those master leased units is beneficial. So that's the primary reason there. We've actually been working with your team actually, and also the Department of Commerce to fill vacancies as they've arisen. So far, it's been very minimal. We actually we're 3 years into the program, and I don't know the current data, but it's been around 75% retention over 3 years. So it's a pretty, so we're only talking a few units per year typically. And then as those have happened so far, what we've done is either close out some last move-ins that we had some households that were still in shelter and they had been promised to eventually get into housing. We completed that over the last year. Or also, if there's been a household that was on state-owned property that like the Unified Care team has identified, collaborated with, things like that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Foster?
Thank you so much, Chair. Not a question, just a quick comment. I know this says recommendation to adopt Resolution 2026-05. I believe this is now Resolution 2026-06. Given the Finance Committee update was updated to be 2026-05. So just wanted to check and confirm that to make sure we are moving and actioning the correct items here. As listed on our agenda today, we have this as -06. So it may be that Afyang or somebody from KCRHA can confirm, but just want to make sure we adopt the correct motion. Thank you.
Thank you for catching. Go ahead, Afyang.
Member Foster, confirming that it's 2026-6.
Thank you so much. And we heard you through the echo. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Jeff? Okay, so seeing none, is there a motion to approve Resolution 2026-06?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a, okay, somebody seconded. Afyang, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair. Chair Kim?
Yes.
Member Wilson,
Yes.
Member Aviva,
Yes.
Member Backus,
Yes.
Member Barone,
Aye.
Member Fain,
Aye.
Member Foster,
Aye.
Member Hay,
Aye.
Member Jiang,
Aye.
Member Rink,
Yes.
Member Robertson.
Aye.
Chair, the resolution has passed with 10 votes for yes, so unanimously.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much. Next, KCRHA leadership will provide an update on the Corrective Action Plan. Dr. Kinnison?
Thank you, Chair Kim. I just want to start by thanking this body and our colleagues at the city and county for the deep engagement all the time that they have spent working through our forensic evaluation findings from April. I know that it's been a really intensive but also very collaborative process, and we feel good about the progress we're making despite constraints, particularly within KCRHA, but across all of us who are doing many very important things all the time. Folks know that we received our forensic evaluation in April. It covered April 2021 through July 2025 and did find significant weaknesses in our financial systems, internal controls, and reporting practices throughout that time, but in particular in the early days of KCRHA being established. There was no evidence of fraud or misuse of funds. And we've really moved now into some back and forth with our funders around expectations for sort of timelines and order of operations in digging back through these issues and correcting them. We are in our implementation phase of our corrective action plan, and I will turn it over to Deputy for Strategy, William Towie, to walk you through the corrective action plan 30-day update.
Thank you. Just going to go ahead and share with you the deck here. And would note that we were pleased to provide the first 30-day update to everyone a couple of days ago. But note that the 30-day report, highlighted, of course, we previously submitted the original corrective action plan. Did want to call out a couple of items from the June 8th letter we had received. One was to note that the $6.4 million finding had been resolved, and that was something that had been resolved in late 2025, early 2026. But we did include that details around that in the 30-day report. Also, the governance items that were noted in the June 8th letter were also previously engaged with, and so we did make a note of that as well in the 30-day report. The report itself covers 11 key CAP deliverables that were anticipated to be engaged with at the 30-day mark, and the document provides status on those 11 and provides kind of the key information on where we're at with those 11 items. And I won't read out the text here in the slide, but they generally are existing in these sort of core financial stabilization areas. We've been able to establish the practices, multiple dashboards internally for tracking the overall response to the financial work at hand. And in many cases, we're also providing artifacts of one type or another. It's notable that in some cases, the artifact might be a single document or a small number of pages in a document, and that's provided in its entirety. In other cases, the artifact or the example might be a particular system or a much larger workbook. And in that case, we provided a screenshot or an example of what that artifact And that would be a representation of it. And we would then welcome, any more deliberative engagement with any of those underlying artifacts that are presented. As an example, this is the core accounting dashboard here, where we're tracking 68 different items. We have good progress through this so far, with over 50% getting ready to be closed, 30 are in progress, we've one pending. Generally tracking those in the kind of areas of operations that they exist, also tracking sort of the risk levels associated with them. And again, this is just a screenshot of the dashboard of a much larger tool that's in process there. Another example of an artifact that is representative of a system is a screenshot of our NetSuite accounting system. And really this is responsive to the memoing going on in here, which is a key tool we've been using since 2025 that directly supports enhanced ability to overcome some of those previous challenges that surfaced as unreconcilable receivables. So this is an example of the methodology that's been in place now for over a year, that really makes it much more straightforward and simple to ensure that those receivables are in place and accounted. Obviously, the report went out to you fairly recently, and we will welcome any engagement or questions that you or your teams have relative to the 30-day report, and are looking forward to and appreciate the commitment for external support in this regard as well. And we will continue to work against both our corrective action plan checkpoints, as well as some of the funder guided checkpoints that have arrived. The 60 and 90-day reports will be cumulative, so that the 60-day report will include the items that we're presenting in the 30-day report. So that way you end up seeing a full picture of what's been happening. And just noting some of the priority elements that we're working on there in terms of receivables, cash flow, admin budget, and documentation of internal controls has been a key focus. And you'll see clear evidence of that in the 30-day report. Examples of that, obviously, we didn't include, the many dozens of actual policy documents, but we have a framework for managing and administering all of those various policies that's in place today. And that's really the update for you there on the 30-day Corrective Action Plan report. I'd welcome any inquiries or questions.
Councilmember Barone?
Thank you, Chair. William, we went a little bit quickly about the 6.4 million programmatic overspend and the resolution there. I think it would be helpful for us to hear, and just for the public to hear, exactly what that resolution is, because my understanding, and I just want you to correct me if I'm wrong, is that the issue was like categories of spending, and that we had overspent, but there was eventual authorization to move money into the bucket so that the agency wouldn't be overspending. Is that accurate, or can you provide a little bit more explanation of what that resolution is regarding that particular finding?
Thank you, Member Barone. That is an accurate representation, and I would perhaps, share it a little more generally, in that with the City of Seattle, we receive approximately $100 million of contracts that we use, that we administer each year, and those contracts are codified, if you will, in a summary budget with different kinds of project types. Maybe it's emergency shelter, maybe it's day center, maybe it's rapid rehousing. And those are cumulative figures that are representative of the total of the underlying contracts relative to that project type. And so there was a holdover from COVID funding a couple of years ago, where a series of day center allocations and other projects were in the wrong project type, essentially. And so what happened is, as we processed the payments to our providers delivering those services, it showed up on the wrong line item of the project type. But the overall funding amount for the total contracts was never exceeded. And so there was a corrective memo, and that is an artifact that's in the report documenting the correction of those funds and contracts to the correct project type.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry, Councilmember Barone?
Well, another question if folks don't have a question yet. William, the other thing that on the presentation that I would like some clarity over is in the dashboard, you have items that are marked ready to be closed, and then below it, there's items that are closed. Can you explain the difference between ready to be closed? I'm struggling to figure out what ready to be closed are, and then down below the items are actually closed. Is there a distinction between the ready to be closed and the closed label below?
Yeah, thanks for commenting on that. This is a screen cap of a live in action document that is fully updated once a week by the team to adopt and stabilize the dashboard reporting. One of the reasons we have the ready to close is we're really paying very close attention at the executive leadership level on making sure that all of these things are clearly and demonstrably satisfied. And so the process is for the team to put it in the ready to close when they feel that they're at that point, and then it gets formally closed through a weekly review. So that's likely where the difference is there.
Councilmember Fain?
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thanks for the report. I'm wondering if I think for some of the timelines that have been outlined, internal capacity has been indicated as a reason for that, any delays. And so I'm wondering if and hoping that the motion that we just passed to allow the authority to hire more staff will help with speeding those timelines up. And if you could speak to that, please.
Absolutely. I know CEO Kennison and I are both excited to have that resolution passed today, because it does help clear up the challenge that we faced by not being able to hire a replacement accounting staff that we really need at this point, because our accounting team and our finance department is matched to our regular normal workflow. And this responsive work requires significant additional capacity. And, we can lean into it with our existing team if it's fully staffed, but with the existing team also being understaffed, that has limited our ability to go as quickly as we would like with this. And we're excited that the resolution is passed. We have an accounting position that is ready to be filled immediately. It's a backfill for a position that came open 6 or 8 weeks ago. And that will really be a representative improvement in our ability to execute on some of these things. Thank you for the question.
Member Aviva?
I have a question. I know that Clark Newber had suggested that we also explore the compliance requirements for federal contracts, and I'm wondering if that has been prioritized in your matrix of things to address first, and if you think any of that will impact our COC applications.
Yeah, I appreciate the question there. I would note that KCRHA has been operating in compliance with federal regulations over the past years. We've had multiple audits and state requirements. The evaluation highlighted opportunities to improve, and we are focusing on those.
Okay. Are there Councilmember Foster?
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for this, William, and for the update. I want to turn us to the progress being made on the $8 million, which I believe you have as item 2, so page 8 and 9 in the report that was sent over. And what I see here is just a note that mentions adjusting entries will likely be required on historical balance variances, and also, an indication of additional work needed within the next 30 days. And I just would like to, William, if you can speak a little bit more to what additional work is yet to happen in terms of that reconciliation. I continue to think this is just one of the most important components of the findings and things for us to address.
Thank you, Member Foster. It is an important question, and it is a central item in that the unreconciled receivables, as described by Clark Newber, functionally represent funds that were distributed by KCRHA to providers to deliver services that were not correctly or able to have been sufficiently billed back to the funders. The initial process of reconciliation that our team is engaging with is essentially a cash accounting process whereby we identify what the flow of funds were relative to our different sources of funding and the expenses related to those sources of funding. And what that'll enable us to do is to move fairly quickly to at least understanding what we believe those numbers are for each funder. The secondary task would be related to delving into the historical records to identify exactly which contracts, exactly which invoices and payments were the component elements of those amounts. And the work has been progressing, so we're confident on our HUD funding relationship as being clear. We're confident on our Department of Commerce relationship being clear. The challenges that we're just kind of, and again, the staffing delay has hurt us here, is getting through the city and the county. And we kind of have a general sense on both of those funder relationships. Where we're running into are some challenges related to the annual underspend carry forward agreements that take place each year, and also related to fund swaps that are a normal part of business. It's good partnership, it's good teamwork, where the city and the county over the years have worked together to facilitate more successful outcomes by changing the plan relative to who might be paying for what on some of these programs. And those are where the details are a little bit difficult to track sometimes, because we may have expended the funds and marked them as being City of Seattle funds for a particular project. And then 3 months later, the county and the city decided, no, we'll have the county pay for that. And that needs to be tracked and documented. And that would be an example of a fund swap that are those details. And the fund swaps and the carry forward details are part of the cash accounting, and we're getting pretty close to being over the finish line on those. And then there'll be the deeper opportunity to really lean into a full artifact accounting of the historical thing. If desired, it may be that the cash accounting outcome is sufficient for decision making and moving forward.
Thank you for that, William. I just want to make sure that I've got clarity, as I know we talked about this when KCRHA was in our committee over at the City of Seattle side as well. So what I'm understanding is that, and just from the report, it says from within the next 30 days. So anticipating that by the end of July, or this time in July, that the initial cash-based reconciliation, so the determination of King County resources versus City of Seattle, that will be completed at that point in time, is what we're anticipating right now.
Yes, that is our plan, and I'm much more confident in having a happy face about that commitment, given the resolution that passed today. We have an additional accountant ready to start that will really help us with this work.
Okay, got it. And then the specificity of, this is from the City of Seattle contract for X, Y, and Z. Will we anticipate being able to have that? Are you saying a further 30 days? Just the way that it's written, I want to make sure that I'm clear about that in terms of what's in the report.
Yeah, I think we'll have more clarity on that. I do want to note that as Clark Newber's evaluation noted as well, there is a limit probably that will come up against at some point, where some transactions will just be so far back in time that we may not have sufficient documentation to really identify, like, okay, was this $22,000 adjustment because a provider chose to move unutilized funds from one of their contracts to a different one of their contracts. That's just a sort of a talking example, but I do want to highlight that we think we'll be able to move very quickly and have a strong sense of the cash accounting, and then engaging more deeply with the underlying detail. I think of it as sort of an 80-20 thing. I think we'll get 80% of it very quickly. I think the other 20% might take longer.
Thank you. And just have one final question, if we can turn to item 4, which is page 10 of the report. So on this one, I know this is about, and William, please make sure I'm correct here. I sort of read and understand part of this action as being able to create some tools that help us as the agency is moving forward to have stronger tracking and invoicing. And with this one being on the revised schedule, I wonder if you can just speak a little bit to the impact of what has already been able to be completed in the last 30 days, and then what is getting delayed or adjusted in terms of this action.
Yeah, let me just catch up with you quickly on that so that I'm really viewing exactly what we're talking about here.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, yeah. So item 4 is the fund advance inventory and roll forward template. Yeah, thanks for surfacing that. The tools that we've used historically for this were, again, kind of apropos with an early organization getting started, but they were mostly spreadsheet based. And what's been happening over the past period of time is that we've been trying to integrate that fully into our NetSuite accounting system so that it is outside of some of those other tools. The primary driver of this relates to, again, the King County and the City of Seattle, the interactivity between those funding sources, and the role that the advance funds that we receive from City of Seattle mean that we need to, actively engage with tracking of those things. And so we have had pretty robust tools in spreadsheet format that we've been using, and those were, from my understanding, really adopted and solidified late 24 into 25. But now we're migrating towards NetSuite with those. Also, in some cases, we've had to have kind of one tool for working with the City of Seattle and a different tool for working with King County. And so the goal is to, by moving them into NetSuite, it's a single integrated solution.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That was my last question.
Thank you for your questions. Any other questions or comments for William or Dr. Kinnison? Okay. Seeing none, I think we're going to move on to our next agenda item. And William, this is you again, Associate Deputy for Strategy, will be presenting on the 2026 point in time count. He is also joined by Dominique Alex, CEO of Mary's Place, and Daniel Malone, Executive Director of DESC. William?
Thank you, Chair. We're excited to have CEO Alex and CEO Malone with us today, and to quickly roll through the point in time count release. I believe all of you have had a presentation on this previously, so excited to roll through it again. We released the point in time count, as you know, along with a press release and also a frequently asked questions and a blog post that kind of leans into the core question of why does homelessness continue to increase in Seattle. And so today we're excited to have some guests with us to engage in a conversation about the point in time count results. So what I'd like to do is just roll through the point in time counts sheet fairly quickly, and then allow our guests to share some of their thoughts and comments, and then kind of have sort of a time for conversation around the results. And so again, I think most everyone on the meeting has seen this, but for the benefit of other viewers, we released the point in time count. The introduction section talks about what it is, how it's completed, some of the key highlights, and the methods and practices and sources for additional information. One of the key takeaways from this is that we know that the point in time count shows homelessness in King County continue to increase, although at a slower rate than in the past. And here we see in this graphic how we've had a 9% increase from 22 to 26, as opposed to a 26% increase from 2022 to 2024. That declination in the rate of increase is important. That translates to over 2,500 individuals or households who aren't homeless because of that decrease in the rate of increase, which is a bit wordy. Another key takeaway here is that the number of shelter beds did decline. That was largely driven by a declination in household shelter beds. And of course, the concomitant characteristic of that is that then the unsheltered increases. The next thing that we wanted to do was to just provide some context around the overall system flow that we experienced. And the purpose of this graphic is to highlight that the point in time count is one kind of data set that helps us understand a broad flow of individuals through a homelessness response system that uses a variety of interventions to engage with people, and importantly, successfully houses over 10,000 individuals as part of the solution set. And that's been going up each year as our region continues to increase its permanent supportive housing and other elements. The next slide speaks to race and ethnicity. I would just draw out the census population bar here, which highlights disproportionality as it shows up within the system, and how important that is relative to informing the interventions and the service levels that we provide. You can also see some characteristics about how different subgroups engage with the system. And it's important to note also, this is just an initial release, the early numbers that we received from University of Washington. The full report will be expected in September or October, and then these data will be in conversation with prior year data as well that inform and guide our understanding of what our interventions are engaging with. Here we see family homelessness, and again, a couple of takeaways here. You know, one I would call out is the percentage of people being sheltered. It's closer to 50% here. That's, you know, different than here, where with 18,000, we're seeing an unfortunate situation now where we essentially have approximately 3 individuals for each shelter bed in the general adult population. In the family, it's a little different here. And again, this is households versus individuals. And so if you had an adult with 2 children, they would be a single household in this bar, but there would be 3 individuals in this bar. There's a declination here from total numbers of households. And I know Mary's Place has been doing some exciting work and investment around prevention services that are important and useful. Mayor Wilson, I see your hand up.
Oh, sorry, I was actually going to wait till the end. That was an accident. I'll wait till the end.
Brilliant. All right, thanks. The next section speaks to initial data that is self-reported around common vulnerabilities, domestic violence, serious mental illness, substance use, chronic homelessness. These self-reported data is congruent with our historical understanding of these categories, veterans at 5%. And, you know, it's worth noting that, again, in the full report, there'll be more detail around these elements. And so if you were perhaps examining just a single subsection, say, for example, chronic homelessness, when looking at that population, we would expect these numbers to be different than they would be against the broader population set. Another important, interesting set of data that happens at the same time here as the PIT count is the housing inventory count. And this is an effort to count and understand all of these assets within the countywide system, whether they're in our homeless management system or not. At this point, we estimate over 90% of the system is now participating in HMIS, and we continue to see some of those remaining outliers joining into the system. And it's so important because the data is a key driver of effectiveness in an environment where we're really have a lot more demand for services than we have capacity. It's crucial that we use the services we have to the deepest effect. Here you can see emergency shelter at the bottom, relatively static over the last many years. The other permanent housing going through here, I often think of these as sort of voucher-based programs. The yellow is a permanent supportive housing. You can see that increasing. And then rapid rehousing and transitional housing also increasing during that period. There's a few different ways to look at that. Here's a longer view over time from 2010, so going over 15 years back, where we can see the response that's been taking place in our community to the increasing inflow of folks who are experiencing homelessness. And you know, it's kind of one of the key takeaways from the point in time count is that the system is doing amazing work. It's moving a lot of people through. We're housing a lot of people. A lot of people are coming in and successfully exiting, but the inflow just continues to grow. This is probably one of my preferred ways of viewing this, where we can clearly see how permanent supportive housing has been increasing. We can see the growth of emergency shelter along the way, and those same other elements in conversation with each other there. And then the report finishes out here at with some footnotes, and then it's on our website with links to a lot of the other elements as well. And so at this time, I'd love to welcome Dominique Alex to perhaps share some thoughts or comments around family and household homelessness.
William, before you turn it over to Dominique, Mayor Wilson, do you want to ask your questions now of William, or would you rather wait until after the guests?
I can just ask quickly now, and I imagine that we don't have a great answer yet. I mean, I'll just say overall, I'm very, very concerned by the really significant increase in the rate of unsheltered homelessness. We were already a national outlier in having over 50% of our homeless population unsheltered, and now when it's up to over 2/3, that's pretty shocking. I guess my question is, it seems as though the kind of high-level explanation for that increase is in part the loss of significant numbers of family shelter beds, but that does not seem to be reflected in an increase in family or youth homelessness, at least from the high-level data that you've presented here. And I'm curious as to the explanation of why that is. And hope that if we don't have an analysis of that now, I hope that we can get one by the time the more detailed report comes out.
I appreciate the question, Mayor. I think it's an important one. It highlights a couple of things. One, the point in time count and the housing inventory count are just snapshots. And it doesn't take a whole lot of shelter bed movement to change these numbers. And the shelter bed system is very mobile. Every year, new shelter beds are added and other shelter beds are lost. It's the nature of the system. The family and household beds were the primary driver of this drop from, just over 7,000 to 6,500. Otherwise, it really would have been quite static, and then we would have seen a similar relationship there. The point you make, I think, around how that's interacting with these estimated numbers. It's important to note that these are estimated numbers of folks who are out there. They aren't numbers of people served, particularly. The gap between who's out there and who's served will change. There's always going to be an oversupply relative to the available units.
And we do have quite a bit of time for on our schedule, so we don't have a shortage of time for questions either. So should we go ahead and move to our guests, and then we can also engage in questions and discussion afterwards? Unless there's any burning questions for William right now. Okay, seeing none, William?
I would welcome Dominique to join in the conversation.
Okay, well, thank you all for having me. I will highlight a few things after looking over this report and working very closely with KCRHA and UW to share the family story from the perspective of our emergency intake line, which serves all of King County with multiple providers that provide shelter beds, and our programs too. While we have seen a small decrease in family homelessness, the PIC count also shows an increasing unsheltered family homelessness story. And so we know that there is a need for more family shelter beds. As noted, there was a decrease over the last year due to redevelopment. So we have a project that is happening in Burien, and so we had to temporarily close that site. And we are going under redevelopment and will open in mid-2027. So that will be a 200 shelter bed for families. And we also typically borrow sites that are slated for demolition from developers. And once they have all of their permitting, we move on to a new building. We have done that 27 times in the history of Mary's Place. But one thing that to note, over the last few years since the pandemic, real estate has shifted quite a bit in this community where buildings like that are not as available to us anymore. We also closed two expensive shelters that we were operating that were congregate style and have strategically moved to providing shelters that are single rooms for families only. We learned a lot through COVID, and from a health and safety perspective are no longer operating that way. And we also did not have the operating dollars to continue to operate that many shelters. So every day, just so you all know, getting the picture of family homelessness in our county, we get anywhere between 40 and 50 calls a day for families seeking shelter who are unsheltered. And they are only able to bring in 1 or 2 of those families a week. And so the need is really big in our community. As you see, that unsheltered number has grown, and people experiencing homelessness at a higher rate are experiencing it again as a result of not having enough shelter space. So we need to stop the inflow. And so Mary's Place is thinking about not only adding shelter beds in this partnership, but also thinking about moving upstream. And we are doing prevention work and trying to keep families in their hard-won homes. We know that there's a dearth of family housing units in our community. And so once families are in those affordable units, it is very likely they will hit a crisis and are more susceptible to returning to homelessness because of their past experience with it. And so we know an investment in prevention, rental assistance is very important to break those generational cycles of homelessness, reduce the trauma on children, and to be more cost effective on the solutions to the crisis in our community surrounding homelessness. So William, I can hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Dominique. Really appreciate the insights and the amazing work that Mary's Place is doing and the critical role of the family line that you operate. I'm also excited to have with us today Daniel Malone, whose understanding and knowledge of the homelessness response system in Seattle King County is extensive. Daniel, I wonder if you'd like to join in the conversation at this point and share some thoughts and comments.
Thank you. Really glad to be with you all to talk about this a little bit. So I will come at this from the perspective of a service provider that is oriented toward trying to meet the needs of people who are experiencing long-term homelessness, individuals with serious and complicated conditions such as serious mental illness and chronic substance use disorder. That's the population of focus for DESC, where I work, and we provide a variety of services. So we see people in various points along their trajectory of instability toward hopefully stability. So that includes seeing people in crisis, seeing people on the streets through outreach programs, and seeing people in shelters, and then ultimately in supportive housing environments that we operate. So I'll first, though, make note of something that is emphasized in the report and also in William's remarks earlier, which goes to something I hear a lot in my conversations with people in the broader public around here, that there's often a misunderstanding about homelessness. Everybody recognizes that it's a huge problem and it's a persistently large and unfortunately growing problem. But the misunderstanding that I often hear from people is that people see it as static in terms of the individuals and families who are experiencing homelessness, but just adding more onto that. And the reality is, as this report notes, that very, very many people move through the system and out of homelessness, but that is outnumbered by the people who are then newly falling into homelessness. And we've got some experience with that in our own work. The good news is that even people with these very complicated conditions and long-term homelessness can successfully exit homelessness and stay out of homelessness, not to return. The rates of housing retention for people who go into permanent supportive housing, which is designed for people with serious disabling conditions, is extremely high, in the high 90%. So that is a resolution to homelessness for those people who get it. The problem, of course, is that there isn't enough of it for everybody who needs that kind of housing. On the flip side of things, more people, including people with disabilities, keep falling into homelessness at very high rates. And one factor related to that is, of course, the very simple difference between what rent costs in this community and what people with disabilities have as for their income source. Some people with disabilities don't have an income, but many do. And quite often it is federal disability benefits, the SSI program being the most common source of income for people with these chronic conditions that we see. But the federal government provides people on SSI less than $1,000 a month to live on total. That's the amount you get from the federal government if you're disabled and you live in Seattle, or if you live in St. Louis or Tuscaloosa. And the difference, of course, is that in Seattle, there is no private rental arrangement for less than your income, not even close, whereas there remains some kind of lower cost housing in some of those other communities that I mentioned around the country, which is why we have much higher rates of homelessness here than elsewhere. To give you a flavor for what we're seeing at DESC of the sort of inflow of people falling into homelessness, even as we're helping people exit homelessness and remain out of homelessness in supportive housing. Last year, of all the people that we served at DESC, more than 1,200 of them were new to us. The first time we ever encountered them was last year. And those encounters are dominated by situations where people are experiencing some kind of behavioral health crisis. They're struggling with something happening in their lives and in their minds and bodies, and they aren't able to cope with it. And our crisis response programs end up being involved with them. Those folks are also experiencing homelessness, that crisis. And so not only are we addressing with psychiatric and other kinds of health services the immediate behavioral health crisis, but then we're needing to try to address their housing crisis that's occurring at the same time. And so it is just an overwhelming amount of new demand on the system, including within my organization alone, that is just very difficult to meet. I don't want to leave on such a down note, although, of course, any report that shows that homelessness is rising in the community is inherently a downer for us all. But, some things that I think are positive looking for us as a community. One is that the city of Seattle is embarking on an initiative to address that unsheltered homelessness count by creating more rapidly more shelter opportunities, including for people with very high needs. I really appreciate our community's commitment to that. And simultaneously, some actions at King County, I think, are worthy of calling out and feeling positive about, including this new initiative called Breaking the Cycle, which is really aimed at stopping people from falling into these kinds of extreme, precarious situations, such as street homelessness, especially aimed at people with behavioral health conditions and so forth. And then simultaneously, at King County's behavioral health division, there are some new initiatives just rolling out now that are aimed at increasing the level of intensive support, essentially an assertive community treatment model of support for people with behavioral health conditions who are living in permanent supportive housing, so that they can thrive, stabilize further, and better connect to the life of the community overall, and no longer have such risk for renewed homelessness that they might have without that kind of service. So those are just a few reflections from what we're seeing at DESC and with regard to this report. And I appreciate the chance to come talk with you all about it.
Thank you, Daniel and Dominique. Sorry, William, I just stepped in there. Are there any questions of any of our panelists? Councilmember Barone?
Thank you, Chair. I not so much a question as, but welcome folks' feedback on this. I just wanted to comment because I feel like sometimes when we're having these presentations, the community kind of hears things that don't sort of accord with reality, and I feel like sometimes we're talking about the system is working, but then people are seeing in the community and the numbers that are reflected here show something that is not working. And so I just wanted to comment on that a little bit because I feel like it's important for people to realize that there is a lot of important good work. And I just want to particularly appreciate the work that Dominique and the team at Mary's Place, as well as Daniel and the team at DSC do every day to make sure that people are housed, right? Like there's some components of this presentation that you don't get to see in the 18,000, right? Especially when, William, you were showing the permanent supportive housing, for example, those numbers there. There are people that are housed because the system that we have in place, that we have invested and that we all help oversee, they are not homeless today because of the work that has been done, right? And so that's important for people to understand and to reflect. And so I think when we're referring some of this system working, that is what we're talking about. I think the challenge that I think these numbers obviously reflect, and I think it's a sobering reality for all of us, is that we as a community are not, like, our collective response is not sufficient, and it is not working in that sense, right? And I think Mayor Wilson, you made a comment about the family homelessness, and I was actually exploring that as well because I think that also caught my eye. And I think if you look at the numbers in a little bit more detail that are in the report, and I had a conversation with William about this earlier this week, our rate of sheltered homelessness in the family space has actually decreased from 2022, right? Because of the loss of that capacity. So there is reflection there that we're not doing as well in that space as well. And so I just want to sort of like acknowledge the work that our providers are doing, our partners are doing, because I know sometimes there's a sense that like their work is being blamed as not doing enough when it's actually kind of on us as elected officials. And I just want to sort of express that for me as an elected official, I certainly weigh that this is kind of on us to make sure that you all have the capacity to be able to respond to this crisis and that we're doing sufficiently on the front end. I frequently, think of this. I know this is not a perfect analogy, but a little bit of as KCRHA and you all its providers are kind of the emergency room of the homelessness response system, and we have people who are coming to the emergency room waiting area, and the numbers keep increasing. For those of you who watch the show The Pit, that's kind of like the waiting room is kind of growing in the number of people that are coming, and that's the challenge. And we need to work on that waiting room so that we have less people come into the system, and that involves a much deeper sense of investments in terms of making sure that we have housing, as Daniel alluded to, that is affordable. Our rental assistance programs to make sure that people don't fall into homelessness that are, because we're facing, very high record levels of evictions right now. And so just wanted to reflect that, like, I think for the community, sometimes they feel like, well, the system isn't working. And I think that's true on a broader level. But it is also true that there is a lot of important work that is happening that is responding and is addressing homelessness. And so I think I just want to sort of reinforce that for me, these numbers, very sobering. And I think I feel a deep commitment to make sure that we work on the issues, obviously, that have that we've been discussing earlier about KCRHA, improving our own internal systems, but also a much broader set of work and investments to be able to expand the capacity both of our systems like the permanent supportive housing, our shelter system, our affordable housing. It needs to be done in like multiple levels, right? There is not going to be one solution that is going to sort of address this. I think we have to continue working on this on multiple levels. But I just wanted to like kind of reconnect those pieces because I feel like sometimes when we say the system is working, people feel like we're just disconnected from reality because they think that the numbers show that it's not working, right? And so there's two things that could be true at the same time, that there is effective work being done in the community to respond, but it's insufficient for the need that we see in the community. So I just wanted to express my thanks to the providers that you're representing today that are doing the work every day. But we understand that there much more needs to be done to address the needs in our community. Sorry for the rant, but just wanted to express that. Thank you.
Mayor Wilson. Thank you, Councilmember. Mayor Wilson? Did she disappear?
Sorry. Yeah, no.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Board Member Barone, for your comments. I really agree with everything that you said and just want to kind of add on to that a little bit. You know, we know that we live in one of the highest cost regions in the entire country. And we know that when you look at homelessness rates across the country, there's a very clear correlation between homelessness and housing costs in particular. We know that so many families across our region are struggling with the continually escalating costs of housing, of food, of transportation, of childcare, right? And so, you know, the real drivers of these numbers are not a mystery, and I think that really underscores the need for us all in our various capacities to be tackling the affordability crisis and the housing crisis across the board in every way that we can. And then at the same time, I think, you know, we are an outlier in our levels of unsheltered homelessness, and that really underscores the need to be aggressive in opening up new shelter and making sure that that shelter is paired with services that folks, especially exiting chronic homelessness, need there. And then, of course, making sure that we have pathways from that shelter into housing that meets people's needs, whether that's permanent supportive housing or other deeply affordable housing. So, you know, this is there's no quick fix, but I'm proud to be serving alongside so many people who are, you know, who see all the facets of this crisis and its causes, and are committed to really tackling them.
Thank you, Mayor. William, I have a methodology question that I would love to get your take and thoughts on, and maybe it may require some deeper dive, you know, at another time. But Derek Belgard from Chief Seattle Club shared with the executive and the executive's office some concerns around when you disaggregate the data for Native populations. Our Native peoples made up about 15% of the homeless population and 32% of the chronically homeless population in our 2020 count. But in our most recent, in the most recent data, we are potentially seeing 11% decrease in the Native populations since that 2020 count. And Derek shared with the exec some strong concerns around what the change in methodology in 2022 did to skew the numbers for our Native populations. And, you know, I mean, Daniel and Dominique, I know you know Derek well and work with him quite a bit. And so, I mean, this is a question for all of the panelists, but this is that data point is particularly concerning if we see that the overall, even though the rate has decreased from 2022, like if the overall numbers, raw numbers are increasing, but we have one of our disaggregated data pieces is telling us such a dramatic change from 6 years ago. What is that's a very concern, like what is happening there in that population, or what is happening with the data that is not maybe telling us the full story about that population. Can you speak to that, William?
Thank you, Chair Kim. It's a really important question, and I was grateful to have the chance to engage deeply with Chief Seattle Club, I think either last week or the week before, on this very topic. I would note that our partner at the University of Washington, also kind of engaged with this, and his comment on this was that the reported figure and any apparent decline in Native homelessness as a percentage of the larger element here too, because I think when we say 11% decrease, that's relative to the percentage that they had of the whole, right? And so, but Dr. Almquist's comment was that, you know, the reported figure in any apparent decline in native homelessness since 2020 are largely artifacts of how the categories are built, not evidence that fewer native and indigenous people are unhoused. And that is why he feels that we need a dedicated report on native and indigenous homelessness produced with and for native indigenous communities, rather than what's only inside the federal framework. And then that way the response can, you know, also be shaped by the people and communities most affected. And we're really interested at KCRHA, the research and data team that we have here, in finding ways to reach difficult to reach populations to get the best data we can.
I appreciate that, and I would just offer up, you know, I know that this is this data point is very concerning for the executive, and we certainly would want to make ourselves available to be a partner with you all, and not just as a not just to ensure that it's not just an add-on, that we are also taking a hard look at the tool itself, the general tool, in addition to any further work that needs to be done to better reflect subpopulations. But I think the tool itself also should be looked at. So I'm just making ourselves available as a partner in this very important line of inquiry.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Were there other questions or comments for Councilmember Foster?
Thank you so much, Chair Kim. I actually wanted to just appreciate you for asking this question. It was one of the questions I wanted to bring up as well. And just more of a statement is to just share with other board members. I think it's important to read the statement that Chief Seattle Club put out yesterday, and it's available on their website, and references the change in the methodology from 2020. And so just wanted to make sure to elevate that for other board members here. And thank you, Chair Kim, for bringing that those questions. And I think this is something that's really important for Native populations, and also other like Black populations, multiracial populations, because we know we continue to see that disproportionality, and it's important to make sure we have the numbers right, and also the deep engagement work. So just wanted to say thank you for that question, and share that availability of that statement to other board members.
Councilmember Foster, did you have other questions?
Nope, that was it.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Any other questions or? Okay. Well,
I just raised my hand last
yes.
minute. I apologize.
No, don't apologize.
I just wanted to also just thank everybody, and especially for the speakers that came. This is incredibly complex work. And one of the things I want to elevate to the board that is a little known thing that's happening within the shelter system is that with the rise of the very good work that the state has been doing around not having young people enter into care or with child removal, it's also created this very unique situation with young people where there are these extended beds for 16 to 18-year-olds where they can stay in a shelter situation for up to 2 years. And so as we look at the data in HMIS, I think it's really important to also think about what leads to this chronic homelessness that we're hearing about. And if you think about institutionalization, what I found when I oversaw a youth shelter was that these were young people that consistently fell into the gap that was intentionally created because DCYF didn't have enough information for child removal, which is really powerful, but also these young people had nowhere else to go. And so they existed with constant backpack checks coming from high school, you know, of living in these very high stressful environments, that this was their normal. And I actually witnessed a young person who needed to stay in a shelter bed for 2 years. And I raise this because as we look at the system and we're looking at the data, I think that we also have to drill down into some of these individual pieces that some of us who aren't doing that frontline work are aware of to just elevate, especially with youth and young adults who are so often, start within that homelessness pipeline and then continue on. And what does that look like? But for these 16 to 18-year-olds, they often will seek emancipation in order to try to secure housing. And there's these additional challenges that happen that puts them at such risk of vulnerability. And so as we track the data and as we're looking, we also, and through that lens of disproportionality, what we're seeing in the system itself is the high rate of youth who are experiencing this gap that was created and remaining within it with no stability, trying to find their way to that kind of stability. And I know that there's been work around what HMIS will continue to look at, and especially longitudinally for these youth in particular. But I just wanted to elevate that since this is our purview and we can really make sure that we're intentionally focusing on caring for the most vulnerable in our community, because it does expose them to additional risks such as exploitation and trafficking.
Thank you so much for that. And Board Member Jang and then Foster.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for all the work on this and for the service providers for coming and sharing your perspectives as well. I think, from my perspective, being an elected official in Issaquah, I do think, this is, I think the top line numbers for the county are concerning, but I think also, what homelessness looks like in each community is also different. And so one thing that I think, how we can continue to build on this in the future is, the further disaggregation, or even as Board Member Aviva said, focusing more on, what are some of the individual stories of folks in our individual communities and what we can do to help those, I think is really important, especially for those of us in communities where we honestly don't have a lot of services. Like right now, our approach is basically to say, hey, you can go to a shelter in Bellevue or Seattle. And then we say, oh, how come folks aren't accepting services? Like, well, so I think, figuring out how some of us in our communities who have folks who are becoming homelessness within our communities, how we can address those issues. And especially as smaller cities, we don't necessarily have enough resources on our own. And so, that's just something that I want to flag as something that I've been thinking about, as we're thinking about how we can expand the services available for the people who are within our community who wish to remain in our community. How can we have a better answer for folks other than, sorry, you have to go to Bellevue or Seattle, which I don't think is a good answer and we need to do better.
Thank you. And Councilmember Foster?
Thank you so much. I said I didn't have a question, and then I realized that we still had Dominique and Daniel with us, and I realized that I do actually have a question. So thank you so much, Chair. And I wanted to turn, and I really appreciate you, Dominique, for your leadership and for everything that Mary's Place does, and in particular for sharing the gap between the need that you're seeing with that call, with the calls that are coming in, and what you're able to provide in terms of shelter space. But I actually wanted to turn to your comments about prevention that you made earlier, and ask if you could share with us what you're seeing as some of the most important strategies around prevention. I know you already mentioned rent assistance. I know there's also been some work around the state for sort of no wrong door access and dollars going out to youth and families. And as we're trying to get ahead of the next as we're working together to both address and prevent homelessness, I'm curious what you think this board needs to hear.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I would say that with prevention, we're actually at a 4-year study with the University of Notre Dame's Lab for Economic Opportunities. We're in the final year of that 4-year study. So there's information we could share with you. And once we are done with the study, we do plan to disseminate that. One of the things that we have included in our prevention study is a one-time assistance that we're studying. And the second group is people being able to access multiple assistances. So that includes like the rent assistance upon imminent risk of eviction notice, but it also includes like whatever may be included in that. So we've been seeing things like utility fees that are incorporated in that. We've also seen parking fees. So anything that would get a family evicted, sometimes it's they're hanging on to all of those things. We also are finding that families are often in a place where it's just a one-time crisis. The families we are serving all have had a past experience with homelessness. So it's one of the criteria that will get you with high points to come into the program. So we know that your past experience with homelessness is the greatest predictor of your future homelessness, particularly when it comes to families. The pieces that we are seeing is that folks don't have childcare. People may have a job loss. They may need access to health care. A lot of single moms are who we are seeing, that we're serving, people with fixed income that have disabilities, children that have medically fragile needs. And so those are some of the larger issues that we are very recurring. And some of those things, like we know if they're an affordable unit, they need to stay in that affordable unit. We know a stay at Mary's Place in shelter for a 6-month stay, which our average length of stay right now is about 180 days. And that costs us about $70,000 per family. And from what we have learned so far in the study is about $8,000 per family to serve them in prevention with a rental assistance and whatever it takes to kind of stabilize them. So that is a huge difference. And I think the biggest thing in all of that is that when we move upstream and think about prevention and that holistic approach of what else do they need besides this rental assistance to stabilize them and give them that opportunity to thrive, it's cost effective and it's reducing that trauma on kids. And it is really thinking about breaking those generational cycles of homelessness and those returns to homelessness. So that's what I would say about it. I think there's a lot to think about. We have a community and an ecosystem of families that have children in them. We have youth and young adults, and we have single adults, and all of those are different needs. And so it's really important to understand the needs of all those populations because it is not a one size fits all. And so whatever it needs to pay the rent, but also to stabilize, will stop this inflow, and it will be more cost effective for our community. And we will be able to think about how do we solve a crisis, but then also end the crisis once we stabilize people.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful. And I would love to see the report when that's finalized, or the study when that's finalized, and maybe we can invite you back to KCRHA to share those findings. And I'll just uplift, and I know I've spoken to your staff and you about this before in terms of the utility component. And I know we are working on some reform to our utility discount program, but I do think that's an important thing for our other board members to hear in their council roles, as well as that cost and the destabilization there and the work that we can do sort of through our other agencies to bring down those costs and prevent family homelessness. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I don't see any other questions or comments. And I think that then brings us to the end of today's meeting. Just want to express again our deep appreciation to our guests, Dominique and Daniel, for joining us and sharing your very important insights. One of the takeaways that I certainly have from this presentation is that there is deep appreciation and respect for the work that is happening at a programmatic level. But I think all of us can agree that at a population level and at a systematic level, none of us are happy with this, with what the numbers are showing us today, and are just committed to addressing and fixing and bringing down those numbers, and addressing the whole needs of our community members who are unhoused. So thank you, William and Dominique and Daniel, for your presentation. Before we come to a close, I just wanted to offer up to see if Mayor, as co-chair of the governing board, if you wanted to say any last words, and if not, then we'll just go to a motion to adjourn the meeting.
No, thank you, and thank you all for the engagement. I think we've got we have a lot of work ahead of us, and again, just proud to be working on these issues alongside all of you.
Great, wonderful, thank you. So with that, is there a motion and a second to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, somebody said lots of things. So our next regular meeting is July 24th, 2026 from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. I'm sorry, those who approve adjournment?
Aye.
Say aye. Opposed? None? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.